Well, hello, welcome to the Magical Mystery School, and thank you so much for coming back. So today we're going to talk about the transits of Saturn. Boo, the big Malefic. Scary, scary. Okay, this is Astrology class 30. And that's very apropos because Saturn's orbit is about 30 years. So, anyway, as the book says here, Saturn, a new look at an old devil. So Saturn kind of does have a bad rap in astrology. Sometimes it's called the cosmic cop because if you try to cut corners and stuff like that, Saturn will catch up to you on its next transit. It's also it's also called Cronus in Greek mythology. So it's Father Time. So it's a lot to do with our 3D reality and how we work through time, basically. And mythologically, Saturn was the father of Jupiter. So, and is also a great teacher, known for being a great teacher. Now, a Saturn transit is the transit that's going to get people in to see their astrologer because it is kind of especially the first rounds with it, can kind of get you down sometimes because Saturn, remember, it's the last planet that we can see with our naked eye. And so it kind of represents our physical limits. The limits of our physical experiences. So one of the things is with Saturn is we can kind of be hitting walls, stumbling blocks, those kinds of things, just in general. Now, Saturn is a transpersonal planet. It's like Jupiter. So it's, the personal planets are Sun through Mars, and then the outer planets or generational planets are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So Saturn, like I said, it takes 28 to 30 years to get around the solar system and to get around your chart. So, so the longer, remember, the slower moving the planet, the more powerful it is. So it's going to spend about 2.5 years in each sign, and then again about 2.5 years in each one of your houses. It also has a retrograde period. It goes about 8 months and then it stops and goes retrograde for about 4 to 5 months. So just remember, during that retrograde period, you can get the applying, the first direct hit, the retrograde hit, and then the direct hit. So you can get 3, and it's usually like that. Typically, astrologers say if you only get 1 hit, you've kind of already learned your lessons, but if you need to go back and forth a couple of times, you probably need to learn that lesson a little better. Now, for me personally, with Saturn, and just kind of in general too with planets, I've noticed that the first hit, I really notice it, right? It's like, whoa, okay, I got it. And then when it goes back for that retrograde, it's much more interior. Those lessons I'm learning, I'm starting to integrate them into my inner self, basically. And then by the third hit, it's not so bad. I can kind of, I've integrated those feelings or those situations, and it goes much, much easier. Now, some people I've talked to, the worst hit for them is the last hit. And what astrologers have kind of come up with, what we kind of come is maybe you kind of ignored those first hits, and the last hit, if you haven't gotten it, especially with Saturn, it's going to like, okay, you didn't pay any attention to me the first 2 times, I'm going to get you the third one. Okay. But just in general, it's Saturn, it's about a 2-month applying and a 2-month separating when it's just that single hit. Okay. Now, so remember, because Saturn is so hooked into our 3D reality as far as time goes and that sort of thing, we really do look at Saturn as sort of our maturing process in life. Now, you are going to get a Saturn return, just like you had a solar return and a Venus return and Jupiter return. But it's going to happen when you're about 28 to 30 years old, the first one. And then the second one when you're about 56 to 58, somewhere in there. and then 84. When you get to be 84, you get a lot of things at the age of 84. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, so that first hit, really in astrology, we consider you basically a child until you're in your 30s. You get past that first Saturn return in your 30s. Then you're really considered an adult. Before that, you're still kind of immature. And then at that second return at 56, 58, you've reached your career climax, or maybe if you've been a stay-at-home person taking care of the kids, maybe that's the time when all the kids have kind of left the home. You become the empty nester, or the career, you've hit the pinnacle and you're starting to think, ooh, what am I going to do for the next chapter in my life? So that's kind of those cycles. And that's one reason I kind of highlighted this book in the Jupiter class. But this is a great one. This is by Betty Lundstedt, and it's sort of a companion. I think I already mentioned this book to you. She goes through the transits to all the planets, but she just looks at squares, oppositions, and conjunctions, and just the planets Mars and out. She doesn't even fool with the one-dayers. But this one, oh, there we have our chimes. I wouldn't want you to feel remiss that you're missing those out. But the cycles, what she's talking about in this book is all the Saturn to Saturn, Jupiter to Jupiter, Mars to Mars, and what those cycles are. So she goes into a lot of detail about that first Saturn return, that second Saturn return. So it's interesting. The first part of the book, she goes through each planet, and then the second part of the book, she'll actually go by ages. So you can oh, I'm 38 years old, I wish. And you can look up and see what big cycles you're going through. So this is a great book also. Okay, so that Saturn return is a reality check for you. You're really looking at facing up to what you really, really want. The biggest thing, it can be very, very heavy. Especially at that return time, you might feel kind of depressed and discouraged and that sort of thing. But just remember that, like I said, that's one of the beauties of astrology. You can look at your chart and go, okay, I've only got 10 more months of this, or I've only got 6 more months of this, and you can move on. But what Saturn is bringing that limitation into your life and stuff, it's really telling you, okay, if you're unhappy about this, you've got to make some changes, because you're not on this planet to be unhappy, right? So, and don't wait for Saturn to force you, i.e., maybe you're miserable with your current special person, right? But you can't get that person to do what you want them to do. I'm testifying here on that one again. Don't wait for that person to, really hurt your feelings in some way, going astray or just ignoring you, that kind of thing. Think about, if you want something different from a relationship, then you need to just start to think about letting go and moving on, right? And the same thing with a job. If you've got a job you're miserable in, but maybe it pays good money, so you're kind of, that kind of thing's going on. If you're miserable, start looking. Nothing's wrong. That's better than waiting for them to fire, to lay you off. No one would fire you. You're too wonderful to be fired, but you might get laid off. Okay, so just remember that's that misery that Saturn puts on you. It's forcing you to become happier in a weird way. Okay, so that first return, you're kind of going from having jobs to, after that return, you have a career. It's kind of dating and having, a temporary, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, to getting married and having a family. You're starting thinking about those things. And some people will find their calling. Maybe they do decide to study astrology. That's exactly, I found astrology when I was about 26 years old. I mean, seriously, when I really started taking classes and things like that. Now, just, and just remember, yeah, that return, that conjunction is super important, but since Saturn is pretty regular, you can pretty much every 7 years, Saturn's going to square Saturn. Saturn, opposes Saturn when you're 7 years old, 14 years old, 21 years old, you're going to get a square. And then at the 28, and around and around and around. So kind of keep those time frames in mind too. And think about them so you can kind of get ready for them in a sense. Okay. Now let's just do a few of the pros and cons. I think I've already been mentioning all the negatives, that's for sure. But just remember that these limitations that Saturn is putting on you, these rules and things like that you keep kind of bumping into, maybe it is a good thing for, maybe there is this job you want, but you find out, oh my God, I got to go back, I got to get a certificate and study for a year. Well, maybe that will turn your life around, and after that 1 year of study, you're going to have a whole career of abundance and more fun. So if you do when you do run into those blocks, just see what are they forcing you to do that might be good for you. Saturn is definitely, you reap what you sow. So if you are trying to cut any corners or be dishonest or anything like that, Saturn, that's the time Saturn will kind of pull you up by the short hairs, of course. But the positive thing is, you may be a person that you're coming from a lot of chaos or something like that in your life. And Saturn will bring you order. Saturn will bring you sanity, reality. So when you're dealing with a Saturn transit, think about your inner calmness, your inner patience, that, life doesn't all have to happen in 2 days, that it will take some time. So just remember, Saturn is your maturing process. So look at it, yeah, sometimes you got to make some lumps, but just remember, you're not alone. When you're going through that first Saturn return, when you're 28, 30, right in there, everybody your age is going through that same return. And it's the same thing, when you're in your 58, you're a little older, everybody is thinking about, changing careers, or they're unhappy or with something like that. Just remember, it's a natural state of maturity. And one of the big things I want to tell you is, each one of these cycles that you deal with in your Saturn, with Saturn in your chart, they do get easier and easier. You do mature. You do develop that inner calmness. Your character becomes stronger. These bumps in the road and that kind of thing, that's what gives you a strong, well-defined character and self-knowing of what you can and can't put up with. So just remember, Saturn does make you stronger and stronger. So anyway, I hope that helps. I know Saturn can be kind of a little bit of a boo-boo. So we'll go on to something more fun next time. We'll do a Uranus, which is expect the unexpected. And I hope everybody has a great week, and we'll see you next time. Just remember, from there to here, from here to there, funny things are everywhere. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye-bye.